My name is Brian Vital. I'm with Inside Sales Team. We are an outsourced SDR firm, a sales agency in Buffalo, New York. I actually met David through some great people we both know, like Discover.org and Outreach.io. But I'm here today to moderate the panel with three CEOs of companies that are changing the SDR game in a great positive way. I'll let them elaborate a little bit more on who they are and what product they have made and their baby. So let me introduce the panel. So Chris?
Sure, Chris Beall, CEO of ConnectandSell. What we do for SDRs is let them talk to about 10 times more people every day, people they want to talk to.
Perfect.
Sure, I'm David Cancel, I'm CEO of Drift, and we are a conversation-driven sales and marketing automation platform.
And I'm Paul Teshima. I am CEO of Nudge.ai. We use artificial intelligence to ensure you don't miss an opportunity to grow a relationship that can drive revenue.
Cool. Thank you all. David and I worked on a few questions for these accomplished CEOs to answer in front of all of us today. And just like 3 or 4 questions we'll go through, and then at the end, if we have time, we'll go through some questions. But the first question that I'd like to ask each one of you is, as a CEO, what is your view on sales development? Chris, want to start?
Sure. I mean, sales development is how the modern organization provides its lifeblood. The constraint on almost every company's growth is right above the top of their funnel. And a lot of companies don't fully understand that, but when they do, they address it with sales development. It could be done by specialists, a sales development group. It could be done by account executives for themselves. But in any case, it's a specialized activity that needs to take place. If you fail to do it, you grow haphazardly.
David?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the one who says crazy things, so that's why they put me on panels. I'd say it's complicated, still trying to figure it out. I think we had my answer on that. Before starting Drift, I was Chief Product Officer at HubSpot. We had a bazillion SDRs, and the jury was always out on the effectiveness of the SDRs, so it's complicated. I think we help a lot of SDR groups, but we're still trying to figure out what the right motion is, right? So
cool. Thank you. Paul?
Aside from obviously what they said, I think that it represents the first human touch in the start of a customer journey, and in this day where customers and advocates drive as much growth as the SDR activity itself, I think it's a super important first touch.
Thanks. So I don't know exactly where each one of the CEOs are in their company, but I think we all know that outbound is a key part of growth, right? Like we've seen the reports, outbound is necessary for continued growth. And so my next question to the three of you would be, how as a CEO, how from the get-go, how from the start do you ensure that your company has a strong sales development team, not just performance, but culture?
Wow. Somebody
Paul, you want to go first this time? Do you mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with first, and I think it was Russ who said, as a CEO, when you start a company, you're the first SDR. I mean, you're doing the calls, you're doing the emails, and having that respect of the role, being willing to sit side by side between your sales team and make those calls and help drive pipeline as much as anything, I think sets the stage for a culture that really drives the success of the role.
I'd say we don't have an outbound motion yet. We're still early. We're a 60-person company. We're totally inbound at this point, and I think we are on the inbound side all kind of jumping in and doing some of the sales development stuff. We have AEs, and we have software that basically helps qualify and do a lot of the qualification work before getting to the AE. So we rely on Drift to do a lot of the qualification and kind of the stuff that we do there, from bots to AI and all that stuff. So we don't have one yet, so we're trying to figure it out.
But it sounds like you're creating the framework of working smart.
Yep.
Setting, rather than working hard, you have qualifications set already, like you understand that.
Yeah, and that's what we help our customers do. Like we help our customers use their qualification rules, even if they have an SDR team, an inbound SDR team, that SDR team is not available 24/7, 365, and so that's where we can jump in and kind of augment that team and help them kind of qualify so that when the AE or the SDR wakes up the next morning, they have a demo scheduled on their calendar.
Awesome. Thank you. Chris?
Well, I think it comes from the top and it comes from how you hire. So, all of culture comes from how you hire. If you let parasites in, you're stuck with parasites. and that's just the way it is. So you have to hire very carefully. And it comes from the top too. I mean, it's very easy to screw up sales development from the company's action or lack of action. For instance, I was driving up this morning, coming up 280 at 6 a.m., and I was having I guess a strongly worded conversation with somebody who supports our sales development team because we had utterly screwed up how their lists were coming to them and created a situation that was both unfair and ineffective. And it came up from the bottom. That is, the person having the problem said something directly to me, and it was up to me to do something about it. I mean, to me, it's the most important function of the company, and if the CEO isn't actually actively aware of how we're screwing up our sales development function and doing something about it, the culture is going to suffer.
Yeah, and we'll go off that. You know, I was a sales development manager, and oftentimes the only times I went to my CEO was when things were going well. It's an easier conversation to have, right? Like, hey, we did amazing last month. But how can you encourage, you know, as you think about building out future teams and the teams you have now, how do you encourage your sales development leaders to have that like communication with you? And not just the good, right? Like that's the easier one to have, but I think you would like to have insights when, especially when things are going bad too. So how would you encourage that communication from sales development leaders and bringing all forms of communication to the top?
The way that we do it today, again, we don't have an outbound team, is we use our software to make sure that everyone knows at what stage, from a conversation standpoint, we are with that customer, right? So instead of relying just on a traditional CRM, where all I'm looking at is what someone input into a row of property in an event or field, I'm actually looking and reviewing and surfacing up conversations so we actually know what people are saying to our prospects. And so we rely on that to understand like where the prospect is, not only in the words of the rep, but in the words of the prospect themselves, right? So that's what we use.
I think it's evolving. I think, as David mentioned earlier, some of the stuff is still unknown. I mean, one of the great things a sales leader, what the sales role did, is develop a cadence and a set of metrics that became very consistent with the executive team. And so you really got a sense of how that business was running. And marketing is starting to do the same thing with the wave of marketing automation and revenue accountability. I think if you go down a level, I'm not sure the SDR leader has that same consistent set of metrics across many different organizations where a CEO or a chief financial officer can say, okay, yeah, I understand that yet. And so I think we need to, as a profession, focus on developing that set of things that can be recognized, understood to drive business and try and be consistent with it.
What was the question again?
So we'll do your situation this morning in the car. How would you encourage, rather than you finding out, how would you get that person to come to you when this is happening?
Well, I think you have to have a personal relationship with everybody on the team so that they know that it's about what the company is doing successfully together, not about them. Culture of blame tends to come up quickly in companies. And one of the things we've done, which I've done everywhere I've been, is you're not allowed to send emails that copy people that have any blame coefficient in them. And I fire people if they do that, even once. So, email's a very dangerous way to communicate about important things. Talk to people. Go sit with them. Our sales development folks are remote. They're both in Denver and in Reading. I try to get out there and sit down with them and just listen to what's going on and let them talk to you. That's pretty important. The other part is you got to look at the numbers, and you've got to be intolerant on the behalf of the sales development team, intolerant of any weirdness in the numbers. Like today, I just looked at our numbers before I came up here. The team has set 27 meetings today. Everything looks like it's humming pretty well. It was pretty screwed up yesterday.
Yeah.
And I've got to share that with the team. I share it with the public too, which I think helps. But if you confess to the public that you're screwed up, then your sales development team's more willing to tell you when things are screwed up.
Thanks. I'll share a story of a bad way to getting it to the top. Everyone remember Henry Schuck, who was here earlier, talked around 9 o'clock, I think it was. Pretty intimidating guy at times. This was back in 2014. We were working with about 6 SDRs in Buffalo, helping his team drive, opportunities, qualified meetings. Someone on my team, I was at a luncheon for the company, and Henry's called me 3 times, and I'm like, that's not good. Someone actually had tweeted at Discover.org, at Henry, my SDR's name has been relentlessly calling him, blah, 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 publicly on Twitter. I went back from the data, he called him 4 times in a week. I mean, you don't always make friends when you're doing outbound sales or outbound sales development, but that was one of my stories, like a bad way Henry found out, like, and he was, say, not happy. But it's one of those things where, like, I wish, obviously I spoke to Henry and talked about it further, but it's always good to have this, like, in my opinion, Henry in that case, to know what's going on. And then I can explain to him through the numbers, you know, hey, like, this happened, but like we called this person 4 times in 1 week. Like, to me, that's not overly aggressive. So yeah, unfortunately, you guys get dealt with a lot of bad things, but I think it's also encouraging the good as well, and make sure both can be healthy. Last question. I think this will open up questions too from the floor and all of you. And that question is, like, what trends do you see shaping sales development in the next couple years? Paul, want to start?
Yeah, so I'll talk about this from the lens of that. We have 15,000 users on our platform today. About a third of them are SDRs, and so we get to see a lot of interesting trends that happen based on what they're doing. I'd say one of the first things is that I consistently hear from our customers this idea of personalization at scale or authenticity at scale. I think was mentioned earlier by Sean, and which is a really noble effort. Today, if you do spend that extra time, you're getting a 3 to 4x response rate to meeting. I don't even know if that's necessarily enough yet. I mean, if you can think about what you can do in automation that time, and so there's this balance of efficiency and effectiveness that's really a challenge that we've got to solve. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of companies now, especially on the tech side, that are doing go-to-markets that are product-led. So think of Slack as probably one of the most. David, your company. And in some ways, and same with us, we have a free product. In some ways, the product is actually doing some of that early SDR legwork, right? Getting that interest, driving that adoption to the point where the SDR can call into a user base, potentially, and it's a different message than a classic outbound mode. And so there's going to be some shifting as more companies become more product-led first, and where that role moves a little more upstream, I think.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you. David?
Yeah, so I think, the way I think about it is like, at the end of the day, people buy from people, and you can go the PQL model and you can sell freemium software, but the type of software that most of us sell, they buy from people. And I think if you look at it from that lens, if you look at the current kind of sales and marketing stack, we think it's completely broken, doesn't make any sense, and it worked well for 10 years ago, but like the idea today that I can order a coffee to be delivered by Postmates in real time and someone can bring it to the stage, like I can sit here, I can call an Uber. The idea that I'm going to go to a business website and fill out a form and wait 3 weeks to a month for a rep to follow up with me, which is the average, is insane, right? That was not insane 10 years ago when we were building a lot of that type of software at HubSpot and other companies, because the companies had all the control. Now your buyer's coming in and saying, like, I've researched your market, I know your competitor, I have these 5 questions. So the idea that they're just going to wait a month for someone to follow up is totally insane. But if you look at the B2B stock today, that is normal. Whether you're a Fortune 100 or you're an SMB, that's like what they would consider best in class. And we think that all goes away soon. Yeah,
so you're definitely capitalizing on those numbers we've seen where it says, like, every minute that goes by and the money sits there, it gets cold, right, more dead. So your company is capitalizing on, like, as fast as, like, real time interest is there.
Not only because it's something that we want, but because that's the new expectation that we've all been trained as people, right? And we did a secret shopper thing on 800 and some leading SaaS companies, and we filled out all of their I want a demo forms, whatever the equivalent is, I want to talk to sales. 57% of those people either never got back to us or got back to us after 5 weeks, right? And we gave up. But that was the average. These are all, if we list the name of the companies that we're talking about, we would recognize all those companies.
Wow.
And at the same time, if you were inside those orgs, the sales team and the SDRs team would be complaining to you, saying I don't have enough leads, right? So something is broken in this chain. So.
Wow, it's fantastic. Chris?
Well, I see 2 things happening. One is there's a talent shortage now. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse forever. So we got to figure out how to do more with fewer people in the world of sales development, and it's just demographics. It's not going to change. And the second thing, which is actually counter to it, is sales development is becoming incredibly important in organic growth initiatives of companies of all sizes. They've got to learn how to reach out to the target markets they want, force their way in instead of sitting around waiting for something to happen. And it's the alternative to buying companies, is to go and take a market and take it rapidly. So you got something of great strategic importance that the money is paying attention to, that's become a boardroom topic. And I can tell you sales wasn't even a boardroom topic 10 years ago. Nobody cared. Sales development is now a boardroom topic, right? So money cares about it a lot. There's not going to be very many people to do it relative to the need, and we've got to figure out how to get vastly more efficient without throwing away the effectiveness.
Do you think that, with the rise of AI and artificial intelligence, do you think that, let's just say the bottom 30% of SDRs are in trouble in the next 18 months?
I mean, no way.
Okay.
AI still can't tell the difference between these two sentences. The trophy didn't fit in the suitcase because it was too large. The trophy didn't fit in the suitcase because it was too small. To AI, it doesn't understand that those are actually both talking about different things. You can't use AI to replicate a conversation, a discovery call, understanding a pain.
Yep.
You can use AI to do grunt work that's behind the scenes that maybe SDRs are doing today.
Sure.
That takes their time away from that relationship building, trust building part of their job. That's at least my view.
Yeah, that's great.
I have obviously I have a little bit different view. I think I totally agree. I think the problem is on some of what you said, problem is that people have taken it all the way to the extreme and say oh, is AI going to replace humans? And it's well, no one has passed the Turing test yet, so therefore no one is going to be convinced that this is a human. And I think the problem that I see with a lot of companies, whether they're calendaring companies or what have you, that use AI is to pretend that they're human. This is Amy. This is John. No, it's not Amy. It's not John. Right? This is a bot, and you should say this is a bot. And so then you set the expectations for someone. Then it's akin to you calling into an IVR system and saying beep, I want to talk to sales. Beep, I want to. Then expectations are set for people. Our bot is used by over 50,000 businesses today on the front line, and it is used to qualify people and to ultimately get them to a human, not to replace a human, but to filter and get to a human, because the last thing that a rep wants is someone that's coming in with a support question or something that's not a qualified deal opportunity, and so it's trying to make them more efficient, not to replace them. So I think we have a long way to go before anything is replacing any humans, and the best reps are never going to be replaced, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. The best reps aren't going to be replaced. I mean, sales is all about trust. Mm-hmm. It's all about somebody throwing their career into the hands of a salesperson. Yeah. And it happens from the very first conversation. And the problem with trust is you can't really, you can fundamentally not trust AI because you don't know who's controlling it. There's a line in Harry Potter, I think, that said, never trust the magical object if you don't know where it keeps its brains. Right? So you don't know where the AI is keeping its brains, and you don't know who owns its brains, and you're pretty sure it's not you. Mm-hmm. So, the sales rep is still the trustable person, and people trust people.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I have one last question, guys, and it's kind of I just thought of this. And so you guys are at the top of your companies, and you guys have a lot of initiatives you're just thinking about and concerned about on a daily basis. But what is one way, in your opinion, when you start hiring more SDRs or building your SDR teams out, or the ones you have currently, what is a way where an SDR, not even a manager, or just a sales development rep for your company, could get your attention in a positive way?
For me, it's always the same. I mean, it's being actually thoughtful, right, in the kind of in their outbound message, whatever that is. But it's hard to be thoughtful. It's hard to be personalized at scale. But getting one more, hey, do you have 15 minutes with an animated GIF in it? Yeah, I get 5,000 of those a day. That's not going to work. That did work. Yeah. It did work 5 years ago, right? And like everything, these are arbitrage opportunities that we have. And once people get 50 of them, then they tune out. We got to move on to the next thing. We got to keep adapting. So it's all about being super personal to me. And now, there's no excuse not to be. It's so easy. I could go search me on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, and just in 5 minutes, I can have something to say that's relevant to me.
Yeah.
I would echo that. Being thoughtful, being personable. I think obviously in the highest order of the stack, if they have some way developed a relationship with someone who can influence me or know me, using that as part of the process is huge, because I think it's 90% of all B2B processes are started with a referral these days.
It comes back to trust and sales. Yeah.
So I do think that SDRs should also be spending time cultivating their own network for their career, making sure they're not just getting the meeting and moving on. If there's someone they really got engaged with, someone they really liked, make sure you do stay in touch and nurture that relationship for your own good as a salesperson in your career.
Cold call me. I just hired a rep the other day. Cold called me at 6:30 in the morning. I flipped the call around. This is back in November. Last year, we sold something to him. Company got acquired. He was available. I thought back to that brilliant 6:30 a.m. cold call and how well he did on that, and I hired him.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Good stuff. We've got about 5 minutes left. At this time, I'll open it up for questions, and we've already got a couple. So, question over there.
Yeah, Chris said something that caught my attention around the talent shortage is just going to get worse. Millennials just overtook baby boomers as the largest generation in the history of the United States. So I'm curious maybe what you meant with that comment.
So what I meant is that, and we saw it in Gabe's numbers, right? How many SDRs are out there? 600 and something thousand. The number that's needed in order to kind of make the growth economy work is probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 times that. And it's not like people are being trained to do this in school, you know? They never have been. So there's a talent shortage. There's also talent that's required that we're going to be more exacting about. Folks are going to require a higher level of performance out of SDRs, and it's going to be more like, you know, what's it like to play in the NFL or something like that. You're going to have to be good. So the talent shortage is very real because the top people produce a huge, huge amount of the results compared to the next tier down. And it's not just bodies, it's people who can do the job.
Yeah.
This one's for Beall. In terms of employee retention, is there anything you do different to hang on to your best employees?
I think most employees are looking for the ability to grow and learn, right? So I don't know if I do anything different. I think in the SDR role, one of the hard things is that the wins sometimes are far separated from their activities. So making sure you're celebrating earlier wins, even if they are just early stage type activities, I think is important. Because sometimes it's a long time before you see that stuff pay off in a deal. And by then the rep obviously is claiming it. So I think that focus on that and really try and highlight their contribution to the business is a big part of it.
Yeah.
David, you mentioned some of your struggles, or that you're just building out the outbound team. What are some of your early struggles that you've seen?
We haven't built out an outbound team yet. Most of the struggles I was referring to was at HubSpot, and which was my previous company, which was always trying to figure out, you know, how efficient was the SDR process. If we asked people within sales, especially within different groups like the enterprise side and mid-market, they would swear that it was efficient every time we would try to model it out and really understand the impact, especially once we took in the churn that we would have within that team, the training costs, the churn, and the growth that we needed in that team. It was hard to back out and figure out, like, how well does this machine actually work? And so we always struggled with that. We never came up with an answer. We anecdotally felt like it was working, and it was a good career, a good like feeder into the AE role, but we could never validate like exactly how much was coming in because of this motion, right? So that was just a struggle that we had. We never came up with an answer. At the end, we kept doubling down on it because we felt like anecdotally it was good, but we could never back out into it.
All right. Any other questions? Yep, right here.
So there was a lot of mention about comp plans today, and I was wondering, how does your SDR's comp plans are designed to influence certain behaviors? So there's inputs and there's outputs.
I know what ours does. Ours has strong incentives to set the 5th meeting in that given day. So going from the 3rd meeting to the 4th to the 5th, there's a daily bonus accelerator in there, and our coach is comped on what is really a more aggressive version of that plan. Something that we found is that the compensation of your coach, and I think if you can afford a full-time coach, you should have one for your SDRs. The coach's compensation should be on a daily basis because the SDR rhythm is a daily rhythm.
We're at an earlier stage, so we're just on a monthly meeting quota, but every one of our sales organization has a component of their variable that's tied to corporate metrics at the end of the year, because we really believe that when the company does well, we want everyone to also do well on an uplift and not just on their own personal performance. And so we do take a portion of the variable and tie it to corporate metrics as well.
Cool. Any last questions? All right. Well, thank you, guys.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks.